Welcome back to the Shine Within podcast. Suzanne Gerber is a modern astrological counselor whose journey began in childhood with a profound mystical experience that sparked her lifelong fascination with the unseen world. After years of study and countless chart readings, Suzanne blends her deep knowledge of astrology with other disciplines to help individuals discover their purpose and live their soul's mission. Love that. Through her website, Stars and Stones Healing, she offers guidance and empowerment using the stars as a map for life's journey. Thank you so much, Suzanne, for being on my show today. I'm so excited to talk with you today.
I'm very excited to be here. Thank you, Gina.
I love your energy already. It's like, oh, I can give you a virtual hug because I feel so warm and already and fuzzy inside. So I just know this is going to be a beautiful conversation. But Suzanne, your journey into astrology began with a profound experience using a Ouija board to discover your late grandmother's Hebrew name. Can you go ahead and share more about this experience and how it sparked your lifelong fascination with astrology and the mystical?
The mystical has always been around me. I think I knew from a very early age that things were not the way they seemed. But when you're little, you don't know what things are. You don't know how other people experience life, so you don't know that it's different, right? I was 10 years old, and we'd recently moved into our home. We had a house built, and a friend came over and we were doing the Ouija board. I'd never seen one. I didn't know how they operated. My mother, unfortunately, she had just lost her mother. And so she was home. She wasn't working. She was just too emotionally bereft. And she was just kind of in a room grieving. And I'm doing the board with my friends, and it just starts zipping around. I wasn't doing it. I didn't know what to do or not to do. And it basically said there was a spirit in the house and that it loved us. And my friend said, let's ask its name. And it spells out a very unfamiliar name, Gidel. Gidel. Name neither of us had ever heard of. I thought it was pretty cool. We have a spirit and it loves us. What could be better?
Yeah.
And I went skipping in to tell my mom, and she just was not interested. And I said, Mom, we have a spirit and it loves us. She said, that's nice, dear. I said, don't you want to know the spirit's name? She said, sure. And I told her, and my mother burst into tears. I said, what? She said, that was your grandmother's Hebrew name, which I did not know. So that was when, and I'm getting goosebumps just even now, all
Oh.
these years later, that talking about it. That was when I knew that was kind of for sure. Something's up that we don't know. And the planets had always spoken to me. I think so many little kids are tuned into different things. They've done a lot of research, really good empirical research on kids, usually between like the ages of 1.5 to 4, maybe a little older. They start talking about past lives. They'll just like be driving with their parents. They'll go, I used to live there. Or when I was a man, and they start telling these stories. And there's so much of this. There's just thousands, I mean, maybe tens of thousands of these stories that you have to wonder, is everybody making it up? People around the world making up the same stories without knowing what other people are doing? Or is there really something here? And if there is something here, how can we use it to enhance our human experience?
Wow, that's a beautiful story. You remind me of my little son. He is 8, and his first language was Japanese. Where's this Japanese language coming from? I literally have a tattoo here. I don't know if you can see it. It says Peyton in Japanese here because
Are
his.
you are
Go
you
ahead.
saying no one in your family, no nannies, nobody was teaching him Japanese? He started to spontaneously speak it.
He doesn't anymore, but oh, I have him video. Like we were watching Power Rangers, and he's like, "No, Zhu Ranger, Zhu Ranger," and I'm like, "Oh, okay." So,
Wow.
like I was just like, oh, blown away. But yes, it's funny because he always. I just
Did
reminded
you
me of the
did you
magic of children.
did you ask him, what are you speaking? How do you know this? Did you try to see if he could remember situations from that presumably past life?
He was 1.5.
Wow.
And I'm just like, I didn't know how to communicate with him. And so, and then he said he loves sushi even to this day. I know he does. So maybe perhaps past life, he was living in Japan. I don't. So
Interesting.
it very
Yeah.
interesting. So it reminded me of that. Oh my goodness. Let's talk a little bit about high school and astrology. And in high school, you started engaging with astrological sun signs and discussing them with your peers. How did these early conversations shape your understanding of astrology and your interest in the zodiac?
Well, I think like a lot of people, I started with sun signs, and I can't say whether it was a Linda Goodman book. Like so many people, that was their moms had a Linda Goodman book on a bookshelf, and that was what they pulled. And people started to learn, like you're a Sagittarius. So if we were in high school together, I might say to you, "Wow, do you love to travel?" And you might say, "Suzanne, I'm 15. I've never like left the county." Say, but is that a fantasy of yours? Is that something you think about doing when you grow up? Do you want to be a teacher? Do you just love animals? Do you have like a sporty, outdoorsy, adventurous side? And that's what I knew. I didn't know much else. But then, as I got older and I went away after college and I lived in Europe and had a fabulous year and a half, just traveling all over the place and really having my horizons expanded. And I do have something significant in Sagittarius, in case you're wondering. And then I said to my then boyfriend, when we get to New York, all I want to do is find my teacher. I just need to find an astrology teacher. That's going to be my mission. And I did in the flukiest and luckiest way. And then as I started to really study, how do you dive into a chart? What can it tell you? How do you approach it? Then I might say to you, if we had a high school reunion, Gina, I might say, oh, you know what I didn't realize? Your moon is in Cancer. So your greatest thing in life is to be a mom. So sure, you want to travel and have all these wonderful adventures and experiences, but nothing is going to stop you from being a mother and providing a safe, comfortable, loving home for your kids. And I would build from there. And we start with basic things and we start to expand out. And then we get to describe, and then you begin to do personality studies of people, which is wonderful because we don't live in ancient Greece or ancient Babylon, and we don't, or Egypt, and we don't need to advise the Pharaoh whether we're going to have a rainy season or a drought or the Phoenicians are going to invade us. These aren't the things we're interested in 21st century astrology. We do want to understand who we are, but now we have an understanding of, we want to understand why we're here. So many people, my practice has changed so much in the last 4, 5, 7 years. Why? Because I've changed. Well, I've evolved along with the people, but people care about these things. They know their lives have meaning. They know that they have a unique significance and purpose in this lifetime. Some people have known it since they were little, right? I'm going to be a doctor for poor children. I'm going to be a teacher in impoverished communities. They just know. And other people are like, I'm 45 years old and I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. These are the people we want to help. What is the purpose? And the purpose isn't always to do a job. Not everybody has a job, and not everybody's job is going to be the expression of their true and their most beautiful essence. For some people, the purpose is simply to develop courage to go after things that they've been too afraid to develop compassion when they were raised in a traumatic childhood, to deal with their fears or their imposter syndrome. And whatever it is, it's unique to them. And this is what a true astrological exploration is. It's body. It's how we mind our health and have relationships with people. It's mind. It's how we pursue our interests. But it's also spirit or soul, which is something deep inside of us that I don't think collectively people are willing to just ignore anymore.
Oh, wow. You said that perfectly. Reminds me that, yes, I came here and I chose to came here. Apparently, someone told me. And then my I had to go through pain to discover my purpose. I was heavily drinking, heavily drinking a fifth of vodka a day in order for me to function as a mother, working, even driving. Unfortunately, it's crazy. Yes, my body was dependent on alcohol. It got so bad that I had to finally surrender and ask a higher power, please help me. I do not want to live like this anymore. And just about 2 weeks later, I wound up in the hospital with pancreatitis.
Oof.
Luckily, the doctor there, she told me, you're going to die within 10 years if you continue drinking alcohol. And then I immediately thought about my two children, then aged 9 years old and 2 years old. Could I really leave them motherless? And I'm like, no, 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 no. I really had to do some self evaluation and really sit with myself. No one visited me in the hospital at all. Thank goodness, because I really needed to be with myself and develop a relationship with myself. And through a lot of prayer and reflection, that was the moment I truly embraced self love, marking the start for a genuine recovery. And then I, things just changed. Like I felt like that was like something that I needed to go through the dark in order for me to see the light. And so we're talking about gratitude earlier. People ask me, are you ashamed of your past? I said, no, I am so grateful for my past because it has shaped me to become who I am today. So I had to find my purpose through pain. And we were just talking about now that I'm in this stage of my life where I want to make a difference, I feel like I'm here to spread the message and help awaken people so they can discover their purpose as well. And having beautiful guests like yourself on here, sharing different ways we can either read charts. I've just been blessed meeting a lot of different people, and I know we were discussing about perhaps reading my chart to see where I'm at
I'm
today.
staring at your chart this whole time, Gina.
Yes, yes, because I'm going through imposter syndrome right now, and I'm going through it, but in a good way, exciting way. But like, am I ready for this way? Like, am I? I don't know. So I just wanted to get your expertise on this.
Well, I have a lot to say about everything you just said. First of all, and you might find this very interesting, um, when we look at a chart, people will say, well, what does that mean? And things don't mean anything. It's not like when you see a configuration, like in your chart, your sun, which is in Sagittarius, because that's your birthday, and that's what makes you a Sagittarius. There's other planets we're looking at. And you happen to have Mercury really close to your sun, and that's the thinking planet and the communicator. So it makes sense that what do you do for a living? You communicate with other people. And they're also touching or conjunct, next to in the sky the planet Neptune. Now, none of the planets are good or bad. Everything is neutral, with an understanding that everything exists to make us aware of our gifts, our strength, our challenges, our soul purpose, and to give us possibilities to move forward, to overcome the challenges, realize the gifts. So they all exist along this kind of spectrum of possibilities. So the sun, which is our ego and our creative self-expression, the sun in its highest expression is our true authentic self. Where we're meant to shine, if you will. It's something special about our personality, something sunny and radiant and positive and generous and loving. But the sun casts a shadow. Everything has a shadow. And the shadow of the sun is becoming egocentric and narcissistic and thinking we really are the center of the universe. The sun might be the center of our solar system, but we are not the center of other people's worlds. So we want to watch for that. Now, Neptune, which you have right next to your thought process planet, Mercury, and your sun, which is your essential expression, represents, I'm going to start with the shadow first. The shadow of Neptune is confusion, mental illness, delusion, addiction, alcoholism, drug addiction, escapism. Okay. And then when that very Neptune, the same planet, is encouraged to raise its vibration through practices we do, through actions we take, winding up in a hospital, checking ourselves into a recovery program, getting arrested and having it forced upon us by the court, whatever it is, by choice or by compulsion, we have the opportunity to raise our vibration. What is the highest expression of Neptune? It's love, it's surrender, it's devotion, it's gratitude, it's appreciation, it's intuition and compassion. And that's the Neptunian journey. And isn't that interesting that you're still on it? And it's not like, oh, I'm done. I'm cured. Why do we say, we talk about addicts, we say they're addicts in recovery. We don't say former, right? We don't say former addict, former alcoholic. We take responsibility for what happened, and we say, but I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to use. I'm not going to indulge. Whatever was pulling me toward that. And imposter syndrome is heavy, I mean, to not feel authentic, to not feel good enough to just do it, that it's crippling. And it's also pretty universal. That was something I said to you before we came on air. It's not just you or me. Most of us feel it. And I said there was one exception, and those are the imposters. Because
That's right.
they're so invested in their false persona that they can't even, they can't even question, they can't even look at whether they're full of it, because they're not willing to do that really hard work of being honest with themselves.
Oh, wow. Yes. We were laughing about that. The only ones who are not don't have imposter syndrome are the imposters. That
Yeah.
is so true. Now, in your opinion, how can astrology help people discover their life purpose? And what are some common challenges people face that astrology can help address?
I think a lot of people have a sense of their purpose. They really do. But when people come to me for a session, and I don't even like to call them readings because it's not like I'm reciting something. We're having a dialogue. I think of myself as a counselor and a coach and a spiritual whatever mentor, but I have an astrological cheat sheet because I wouldn't talk to people on such an intimate level without some kind of sense of, yeah, this is, yeah, I see that. I see this is true. So what can astrology, people come and they usually, I always say, what are your intentions? What's your concern? Why do you want a reading? As often as not, people say they want clarity. They want clarity or they want validation. And after about 15 minutes of talking, I say, you don't need clarity. You're very, very clear. You need support. You need some confidence. You might need to reframe some things, which we'll work on. But people kind of know, but not everybody knows. Some people, and I should say, a lot of people confuse what they do with what their purpose is. And like I was saying before, when I gave you a few examples, I think our purpose has to do with who we become, because it's very hard to accomplish anything if we're not the kind of person who can do it, right? To say we need to forgive more, we need to be more compassionate. Well, if we're still going around with a chip on our shoulder, feeling like we didn't get our needs filled as a child, and in fact, many people, it's much worse than they didn't get their needs filled. They had their power taken away from them with abusive behavior, which is very, unfortunately, tragically, it's prevalent in I don't think I said that right. It's just prevalent and pervasive. I made up a word in our culture. So many people. It's kind of unthinkable when I'm in people's lives every day. There's so much really pain and abuse in childhood that does have people start a little bit behind, because before they can even go after their goals, they have to develop a sense of worth, that they deserve this. And when you don't have that sense of value of yourself, well, that becomes the work. Forget, doing wonderful things for the collective, creating beautiful art, you know, um, starting a business with a product or a service that will help other people's lives. If you don't feel worthy of it, you're not going to accomplish it. So what we do with astrology, and this is what I teach, we're looking for the gifts and what the people have, the assets, the resources, the natural talents that they're born with to do or be certain things. But everybody has those, something. But that's not the mark of whether or not somebody's going to be successful in their own journey. what we want to look at is, well, what seem to be the challenges? What are the conflicts? What are the limiting beliefs? Why do they believe that? What do they fear? Why are they undermining themselves? So we're kind of looking at two different sides of a psychological balance sheet, if you will. And our job as astrological counselors is to help people see what they're buying into and why they don't have to, and why that's just because that got drilled into them when they were little, it doesn't mean it's true. And just as people are waking up to this realization that they have a soul purpose, and I'm sure you've seen this in your beautiful work too, Gina, people are waking up just like across the board to this understanding of ancestral wounding and these intergenerational patterns that get handed down through family lines and come through in our DNA and also in our epigenetics, which means not our DNA, which means the actions that people take. A lot of people who develop any kind of addiction had a parent who was an addict. Often people, when people develop disordered eating patterns, they also had a parent either with eating issues or addictions. And we see this continues on and on until somebody in some generation wakes up to it and says, the buck stops here. I'm waking up to this. I'm not going to treat my children the way I was treated. And I am just seeing this everywhere I turn. And it's, I mean, on the one hand, well, that's really sad because there's so much healing that's needed. But on the other hand, we can't heal it until we can reveal it. And this revelation, I think, is helping people become aware that they are the ones that have bridled themselves and limited their own power. And so what a chart does is it shows us, just like, you got something going on in your arm, you don't know what it is, your doctor might say, we need to get an x-ray, we need to get an MRI, we need a scan, we need to see what we can't see. And that's what a chart is. I actually call it a psychic MRI because it will show us parts of our psyche that we cannot see ourselves. And it takes another person. Yes, my cat is walking across the desk.
I love it. My cat's over there. I was like, "Oh, please, kitty, don't come on my desk." But that's great
I
that your
can't
kitty
keep them
cat is
off.
there. How cute. I welcome all animals. I just love them all.
Yeah. But anyway, so what does astrology do? And I will say, astrology doesn't do anything. The astrologer who has a sensitivity, who has psychological training, who has had spiritual mentors themselves, who can give you a framework and positivity, and not just like, oh, think positive thoughts, because that doesn't change anything. Somebody who can give you real action steps. I give people homework and they have no intention of coming back to me, but I say, well, I'm giving you homework. You're not answerable to me. You're answerable to yourself. And that can be a real game changer because nobody ever told them they're the ones who are responsible.
Yes. Oh, action steps. That's the most important thing. You have to take action. I remember I was attending a master class and I loved it so much. It was business coaching. I wanted to learn how to become an entrepreneur, right? I was just starting my business. And I wanted to get on the program. And I know it's kind of pricey, but I was like, oh, I'm just going to go and attend, get all the nuggets I can. And then it wasn't until there was an assignment. The assignment was there was an assignment. The assignment was for us to share our vulnerable story, just a couple of minutes. So luckily I was already practicing reels, and so I was getting better on camera with my cell phone. So I felt comfortable enough to do a video, but I wasn't really comfortable sharing my story just yet because I knew my video was going to go onto their Facebook group, which was like 5,000 people, women. And so I'm like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. So I got uncomfortable and I did it. And I kid you not, Suzanne, that video landed me a scholarship. So that program that I wanted, I got it for free.
Oh my goodness. How you must have done a great job with it.
I must have got some attention there. But maybe it's because the stars were aligned, that phrase. But what was really neat is because I took action. And that's really what it was. I took action, and that's what got me to that, which then got me into meeting. I was in a group called The Collective. And so I met a lot of female entrepreneurs. We all collaborated together, and it was just an incredible experience. And that's what helped me create my business and podcast too, I should say. Yeah, podcast. So thank you, Pitch Club. Shout out. Shout out. But
No,
yes, it's all right. Uh-huh.
you make such a good point, Gina, that I just want to add to that. There is no growth without some kind of discomfort. That's why they call it growing pains, right? We have to get out of our comfort zone because it's actually a prison. And we say, I'm not ready. I'm not sure I want to do that enough to endure this. But there comes a point where you just have to, it doesn't have to be pain, but it's going to be just uncomfortable. You're going to have to stretch in ways that you don't want. Because if you're going to stay comfortable, you're going to stay stuck. And that's just a law of nature. It really is. And we get very hung up on comfort and readiness and embarrassment, but nobody has ever had a breakthrough being comfortable.
That's so true. Yes, no one has ever had a breakthrough being comfortable. I love that. And you're so right. Yeah. And talking about divine timing, I think everything for me was divine timing. The time in the hospital was, I had a divine intervention, to be honest with you, at that moment. From me then meeting certain people who created a pivotal moment in my life for me. And you actually often speak about divine timing and the idea that everything unfolds perfectly. Can you go ahead and elaborate on what this means in the context of astrology?
What divine timing means to me, it's almost like a little tautological. Everything is in divine time. There are no mistakes. It's to really get the concept, we have to shift how we think about the nature of reality. Are there mistakes? Are there accidents? Was that not meant to happen? Or is everything actually perfect? Now, that doesn't mean everything is predestined, right? It doesn't mean, oh, I knew you were going to say that word, because we have free will and we could just suddenly stop talking, right? We can suddenly, everything is a yes, and then we could suddenly say no, or vice versa. Now, that is free will, but in a bigger context, we have free will, like kind of in a small little way. I'm going to turn left. I'm going to wear blue. I'm going to, date that person. I'm going to get that cat, whatever. But we don't have free will in terms of, well, what family are we born into? What's our basic DNA? These are not choices, but each choice gives us more opportunities. But everything is happening in a perfect way because we're not just these human beings acting out our free will. We're also souls that existed before this incarnation and will continue after. We don't, the body dies, the soul does not. The soul is immortal. Every single religion and major philosophy believes this. People have different ideas about it. What is life after death? Do we go to heaven? Do we become this? And nobody knows for sure. This is all theory, right? This is all conjecture. But what everyone agrees on is we do have an immortal soul. And so every action we take is meaningful because we won't get to take the cars and the books and the beautiful pets. We won't get to take that, but we get to take whatever we have become because the soul is growing. We don't just, all that was for nothing. It's very significant. And it's making these loving, wise choices, scary choices, doing the hard things, right? That's how the soul evolves. A soul is just energy, kind of hard to evolve energy. So the soul comes here in human form and embodies and has these experiences in relationships, to do with money, to do with body images, to do with power and control. These are some of the big themes. And how we deal with them is what either evolves the soul or keeps it stuck, which will determine what happens to the soul afterward. We know what we've come in to work on in a given lifetime. You may have heard these things called our social contracts or our spiritual, our soul contracts. I don't know if we actually sign something. I don't know if we need to, angelic lawyers to draft them up. I don't know if there's you know, a notary up there in that realm, but we do make these promises and we say, this is for my soul's evolution. So everything that happens really is designed to support that. And if it's to become strong and to let your principles guide your actions, not the fear of being, not being liked or not being popular, getting kicked out of office or whatever, those are false reasons. But when we're acting in our authentic truth, that's the purpose. And like you said, your story is the perfect model of this. You had to kind of hit bottom. You had to hit the biggest pain point to realize there's only two directions you're going to go in. And one, as your doctor told you, is going to lead to your death. And the other, well, you didn't know where it was going to lead. But presumably, you felt like that's where salvation exists. But you had to hit that point. And so you might have, like, if someone had said that to you a year before it had happened, you might have said, that's too painful. I don't want it. That's a mistake. I'm fine. Everything's under control. But it isn't. And so the things that seem bad, and I bet you everybody who's listening has an example of this, the thing that in the moment seemed like the worst possible thing, they lost their job, their partner, or their newly dating person broke up with them. Something happened. Maybe they even got sick. This is a disaster. But what happened as a result? A whole life pivot. They stopped going after, if let's say they lost their job. Well, it was the kind of work that was soul crushing and was preventing them from really doing their important work in the world. What happened to that partnership? A person was a serial cheater or a narcissist or was doing something that wasn't allowing them to fully express themselves. So it's usually only when we look back that we can realize that was the best thing that could have happened. That at the time, it always feels like this is the wrong time. It's never a good time to lose your job. It's never a good time to have a breakup in the moment. But in hindsight, in that beautiful 2020 hindsight, we realize it was perfect and we shift into a place of gratitude for it.
Yes, you reminded me of 2020 and then how that moment where everyone thought the world was ending because of the pandemic, that it wound up giving us a break to spend time with our families more, to connect to our inner self, to develop a relationship with Gus, what did it called? God, universe, source. Um, for me, I learned my passions. I finally, because I have been in the massage business for so many years, over 17 years now. And so all I knew was spa. I didn't know computers. I didn't know, I just checked my email on my phone. I didn't know anything with technology at all. And so I finally was learning how to use the computer. I was kind of learning how to create those reels on social media. I had time to actually spend with my kids and we have fun together. So, although, yes, I did lose some family members due to COVID, unfortunately, a couple of uncles, it did give families a time where they can spend with each other, or people, like I said, discovering their passions and learning more about themselves and taking that pause because we were such in that hustle grind, at least I was. And it was like we're robots, like wake up, hit alarm, get ready, go to work, lunchtime, punch out, come home in traffic, cook dinner, go to bed. Like, where's the fun in that? Where is the growth in that? Is just the program state. And so it allowed a lot of people to either wind up leaving corporate, getting their own businesses, getting into different communities that align to their sole purpose, and it's just changed. So you're right about I don't know what we were talking about, but it reminded me of 2020.
We're talking about, well, we started talking about divine time, but it
Yes, divine
really
timing.
led to it
Yes.
led to we have to shift our perspective.
Yes, that's
We've
what it
got to
is.
try to like get a little higher, right? I call it ego perspective. We need to be on high to see things in greater context, because when we're in it, we can't really appreciate the context that we're in. So we need to pull back. Like if you're in an art gallery or a museum, there's a really large oil painting and you're trying to get up really close, you're going to see globs of paint. You're not really going to see the big picture. You've got to step back, right? That's why we see people standing like 12 feet away from a painting. Why? To take it all in. And it's hard to do that with our own lives. How do we step back from our own lives? I mean, that would be considered some kind of dissociative condition. We need to be in it. And this is where it's not only astrology, but astrology is really special in that it can show us timing, where most, even the really good psychics, the channels will say, I can't do time, because in that realm, there is no time, right? Can't ask a spirit, how long have you been dead? I don't know, I'm dead. we don't have Apple Watches over here on this side. So, but astrology really does, because of planetary movement, planetary cycles. And so there's some things that we know. We know that when you turn 29, and then again at around 58, the planet Saturn will complete its 29-year orbit around the sun, which means it completes its orbit around your chart. So you will go through a major restructuring life change. What will it be like? Unique to the individual, but we know that. But then there are other cycles in a person's chart that are very unique to them. Your sun's in Sag, your moon's in Cancer. What's going to happen to those planets? This isn't just based on the same planet cycles. So we've got all these different things going on. And when people really want to get an understanding, what would be a good time to launch my business? When would be a good time to plan my wedding? There really are auspicious timings to do this. It's not superstitious. It's synchronicity. Is a planet from, light years away really like influencing your life? No, that's not how it works. It's not literal. It's energetic, right? It's the great psychoanalyst Carl Jung and his theory of synchronicity, that anything that happens in a moment has the characteristics of that moment. This starts to get a little esoteric, but there really are these connections and unseen forces that exist in a moment. And your birth chart, which is what we look at in astrology, is a screenshot of the heavens at the moment you were born. And there's so much information that can be inferred from that. Now, we don't go around saying, you're this, you're not that, you can never do this, and you'll have to do that. That's not free will astrology. But we see the potentials, we see the opportunities, we see what the challenges might be, where that comes from. And when you spend a lot of time talking to people and learning about psychology and different systems of philosophy and family systems, you start to see the patterns. We're all unique and we're not so different from one another, right? But then as the planets, the actual planets in the sky are moving, as we know they do, the moon moves the most quickly, um, they will make new angles to your birth planets. And that's where our opportunities come up. Or the challenges that say, this is a time to be cautious. Make sure you do it's better time for your research. Like when planets go retrograde, like Mercury retrograde. It's a time to research things, to find out what you're really getting involved with. Find out about that person you want to go into business with. What's the competition? Do your market research. And then when a planet straightens out, or when a planet that can be limiting moves on, and then a planet that brings growth and opportunity and change and expansion, that's when we hit the gas. So that's why astrology in the hands of a sensitive astrologer is really like kind of like a superpower. It's a secret weapon.
Secret weapon. Wow. Going back to when Mercury is in retrograde, can you talk about that? Because I hear that all the time, but I never had a full understanding of what that means. People are saying, "Oh, it's safe to come out, Mercury. We're out of retrograde now," or something like that. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that got really popular. Like COVID, you're talking about the opportunities for families to spend more quality time together, for individuals to pursue their passions. I agree with you 100%, Gina. Of course, we do want to acknowledge there were a lot of people who suffered greatly, and you can't gloss over that. I mean, for a lot of people, it was not a positive experience, even despite their desire to make it that. If they got really sick and then they still have long COVID, that's challenging. But the thing about retrogrades that have gotten really popular since COVID, everybody, it seems like the thing everybody wanted to learn about was astrology, because everybody suddenly knows at least a little bit, which can be dangerous, right? It can be dangerous if we don't have a context for it. The planets don't move backward, right? I mean, how could they move backward? That's a silly notion. But what retrograde means is an apparent backward motion. Like when you're parked at a, not parked, but when you're stopped at a traffic light and the truck in front of you starts to inch forward, right? Like just before your light turns green and maybe he has to shift gears and he starts rolling. Well, you think you're going backward. Wait a minute. I'm not, am I in reverse? No, it's this relative perception of speed based on other planets. So when planets are in their now, and I think we also have a kind of like when we were little, we imagined the planets moving in perfect circles around the sun. These are not perfect circles. They're very odd shaped orbits. Some of them are a little bit more circular, and some of them are more like ovals, and some of them are crazy and they go out past a different planet and then they come back in. And so because of these different orbits, it means on the straightaway, they're going to be moving at a pace close to Earth's. But then when they start to go way out, it's going to seem like they're moving more slowly. And Mercury is going to go around these wide, almost rectangular corners 3 to 4 times a year, because sometimes it gets split around the change of the year. So that's why we can't say it's 3 times a year, it's four, because it's always shifting a little bit. But when Mercury's going around those wide edges, well, it seems like it's really slowed down. Its pace around the sun is slower, but it's still moving forward. So we say Mercury is not in retrograde, it just is retrograde. It's just a state of being. Like you're fast, you're slow, you're retrograde. So Mercury retrograde, Mercury is the planet of thought and communication. It's also close by transportation. This isn't, flying to Europe if you're in the States. This is local travel, your neighborhood, your community, getting back and forth to work. It can, because it's communication, it can also be your devices. And so what happens when Mercury's retrograde? Weird stuff. I mean, really inexplicable things, not just the usual, I had my hard drive crash, my program. I once had I was waiting for somebody in a park, waiting for someone to show up, and I was checking my voicemail. And I had a voicemail from a friend who lived on the other coast saying, I'm going to be there and I would love to see you. And I go, oh, this is so great. Oh, wait a minute. Didn't we already do this? Didn't, didn't I see that person 3 months ago? And I checked, and Gina, this was a voice message from 3 months before that I had deleted 3 months before and never thought about it again until this minute when Mercury was retrograde. I cannot explain this. The message, the deleted message came back and played for me. So when I say weird, I mean weird.
I've had things like that happen to me before. I'm like, wait a minute. Didn't I just delete this message? How come it just showed up again? So interesting. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
And people really will famously like reach out to you like, oh, wait a minute, Mercury must be retrograde. I have certain friends who aren't like followers of the stars, and they'll just send me messages and they'll say things like this. It's retrograde again, isn't it?
That's hilarious. Oh my goodness. Now, what can someone actually expect from a consultation with you, and how do you tailor your sessions to meet the needs of different individuals? And you can also please do share your gift that you have for our listeners.
Well, those are two different things, and I'll try to connect the dots. What people can expect is, well, it depends on the astrologer. I can only talk about what they can expect from me. They can expect the highest amount of personal positive consideration. I will help them because for me, it always starts with what are your intentions? What do you want to get out of it? I'll look at a chart. If I'm seeing all kinds of karmic, soul, spiritual stuff, and people want to know about should I do this business, continue with that, sell this, I'm not going to talk about their soul. We're going to talk about business, right? People are having relationship issues. That's what we're going to talk about. But we're going to talk about it. We're going to step back from that big oil painting and we're going to try to see it in a larger context. If they're having issues, why might they be stuck? I was working with a woman yesterday, and I'm not revealing anything, but her longtime husband wants a divorce. He's just going through some stuff. He's very clear that this is the life he wants to live. He's been telling her this for well over a year. They do not live together. They have not slept together in years. They do not have a marriage. But we had to talk about why she was still in denial.
Mm.
I didn't have solutions. I'm not going to try to bring them back together. He doesn't want it. So my work with her is to get her in a very accepting way, not blaming herself, to see where she's actually running interference with her own happiness. And I was able to show her what was coming up for her in the next 2 months and even next year, how her whole life is changing. We saw it in the chart. These things you can't make up. I said, there is this whole beautiful new way of being in the world that's waiting for you, but you've got to be the one to open that door and walk through it and embrace this new life. And she'd never seen it that way. I didn't know what we were going to talk about. I mean, I knew we were going to talk about this divorce, but until I'm here with a person and I really can get a sense of their energy, I'm watching their face, I'm watching their body language. Are they crossing their arms? Are they pulling back? Are they being distracted? Are they leaning in and taking notes and saying, tell me more? Then I know that there's interest. And sometimes people get really stuck. I get stuck. You and I were saying before we started, we both get stuck about things and we're both really good at what we do, but we're human and this stuff happens. And this is when all else fails. I mean, when you hit bottom, you surrendered. Surrender is a great one. But if you don't know what you're surrendering to, or you grew up having had your trust taken from you by adults, let's just say behaving badly, really doing bad things. Where are you supposed to get the trust to surrender? In the past, when you've surrendered, you've been hurt. Surrender isn't always the path for everybody at every given moment. But you know what is? Gratitude. Because no matter how challenging a life is, there's something you can be grateful for, every single one of us. If it's, and I say just in quotes, just the ability to see beautiful nature around us, to have the consciousness to bring loving pets into our lives. Because let's face it, when people have been harmed, trusting people can be the greatest challenge. We can feel grateful for the sun and how nice it feels on our skin. These don't have to be grandiose things. They can be very, very simple. Thank you for giving me a chance to try again. Thank you for music. Thank you for chocolate, whatever it is, right? And gratitude actually changes our brainwave states. It changes our vibration. It raises it. So when all else fails, there's gratitude. And you know what? You don't have to be in a dark place to do it. When things are good, it's even better because let's not think, oh, look at me. I'm so great. I made this happen. I'm so special. I'm so lucky. We'll keep the wonderful things happening by giving gratitude for it because it will raise our vibration. And when we raise our vibration and can keep it, well, then we start to attract things naturally that are on that vibration. And so more good things happen. We attract more loving people, more wonderful experiences and situations. And gratitude is, to me, it's the ultimate practice. And that's the gift that I have for people. I have a little talk about gratitude, talking about the science of it, talking about the experience of it, and offering people a micro practice in the talk. I will guide them through a very, very short and very, very safe little exercise to start to open their hearts and to allow more gratitude in. And I know you will have the link for that in the notes that accompany our conversation today.
That is correct. Yes, I will have everything in the show notes. But for our listeners who are interested in connecting with you, what is your website, or are you on social media?
Yes and yes. Um, the website itself will be there in your show notes. And then something I always invite people, because sometimes people don't know. It's like, well, I don't know if it could help me. If they're new to astrology, before they spend the money, they want to have a conversation with me. I not only do I understand that, I welcome it. And my name is Suzanne Gerber. And if they go to ask a question, asksuzanne.com, they will go right to a place where they can book a complimentary call with me, no obligation, and just have a little conversation about them. So that's asksuzanne.com.
Beautiful. And I will have everything in the show notes for our listeners. Thank you so much for that beautiful gratitude gift. I'm actually going to go ahead and get that one myself.
All right.
Yes. But last question, how do you see the practice of astrology evolving in the future, and what role do you think it'll play in helping people navigate their lives in these rapidly changing times?
One of the things that I'm most excited about, Gina, first of all, is just not having to defend it anymore, right? You know, my sister's father-in-law, and I was pretty close to him too, an engineer. He would say to me, Suzanne, but you're so intelligent. How can you possibly believe in astrology? We don't seem to have to explain it anymore. People get it. So that right there is wonderful. But so many people that I work with and that I know professionally or personally, they're bringing astrology into other practices. Medical doctors, nurses, healers, therapists, massage therapists, Reiki, energy healers, all kinds of people are bringing astrology in to expand their understanding of other people, because it really is. You know, when I likened it before to a psychic MRI, it's unparalleled in giving us understanding of the person that we're here trying to support. And again, what's important is no judgments. We don't know what anything means. We're there to explore the possibilities with this very self-empowered person that we're looking at.
Wow, wow. Well, thank you so much, Suzanne, for being on my show. Any last thoughts or words? You said everything so beautifully already. Like, this is gorgeous. I love the way that we had this conversation.
I do think it's great for people in recovery, Gina, because a lot of times in recovery, people are just like overcoming things. But what's so beautiful about astrology, it just shows you what's there, what you can be reaching for, and what you could be digging down into. And I think it's a wonderful compliment, meaning not like, hey, you look nice. I mean, something that can be a wonderful auxiliary to anybody going through any kind of self-discovery journey, whether it's through sobriety or just waking up to their divine nature. Astrology shows us potentials and possibilities, and that's always, always worth looking into.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Suzanne, for being on my show. It's been an absolute honor to have you on.
Well, thank you, Gina. It was so nice to be here and to get to share my favorite passion with everybody.
Well, thank you so much.